back to Free Motion Quilting Basics. I'm Angelique, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how to do pebbles. Now, pebbles are a round design. They can touch and be the same size, which we would call basic pebbles. They can be more oblong or oval shaped. They can overlap. They can echo. They're just a really fun filler design. And so in today's video, I'm going to show you how to start with basic pebbles, and then I'm going to show you how to do some variations, and then I'm also going to show you how you can add pebbles to other designs in future videos that we're going to show you. I really love doing pebbles. I find them to be a very fun filler design. They're great for emphasizing certain types of blocks or to kind of pack things down so that other elements pop up. I find that they're just fun. They're organic in the way that they're shaped, and they work great, especially in quilts that have any landscapes or water in them, or to really just emphasize some of the designs that are in the block. Recently, I did a quilt for winter that had a lot of like snow themes to it, and I used them to make a few like snowballs, like kind of packed together, like if you were going to be in a snowball fight. So they're very, very versatile and very fun to do. So we're going to start by showing you some examples of how you can use some of the different pebble designs. And so in my first example here, in the P, you can see that I added some pebbles to a swirl shape that I had first, and I did some basic pebbles around that. On the S here, I did the more oblong or oval shaped pebbles all the way through, where I added just a few other ones as we got into smaller spaces, but for the most part, I kept them all vertical on this one. On the G, this is my spring quilt, so it says spring. On the G here, I did some echoes of pebbles through now and again, just to add some differences in dimension. And with like the echoing, you can do like 2, 3, 4, it's really up to you. We'll show you some basics on that as well. One of the things that like pebbles remind me of, especially as we start to get into some of these other shapes, is the cobblestone streets that I used to walk when I was in Germany. And I think that's why a lot of times when I see fabric like this is literally pebble fabric, right? And I was like, well, what's going to fit better in here than some pebbles? So I did some pebbling in here, which you can see is very blended in, but gives it a nice texture, but you can see it on the other side. And I did some mixing. I did a lot of like typical pebbles or your traditional pebbles or basic pebbles, and then now and again added some overlaps or some echoes just to kind of break it up a little bit. So pebbles can be done in like micro stippling as well, which we'll show you when we get to the intermediate episodes, but a lot of different things. And then this is one I'm still in the process of working on, and I decided to do some free motion pebbling in my border here, and decided to really do the bubbles. I hadn't really had anything where I was doing the bubbles, and with this particular fabric, you know, it's got these small and large circles, so I definitely wanted to add that fun to it with the small and large. And you can see I used a variable thread here. This is our spring fling thread, and I just really, really loved how it helped to pull out those colors. And then I wanted to differentiate a little bit in the shapes of my flying geese here specifically, but still wanted to keep the pebble theme. And so you can see that I did a combination of the ovals with some regular pebbles. There are some basic pebbles, and I did them both vertically and horizontally just to kind of mix that up. And this really kind of creates that walk plots effect that I was kind of talking about in Germany, where you have those cobblestone roads and all of that. So one of the reasons I kind of picked these is you know, my background is in science, and I taught a little bit of microbiology. And when I kind of got to this particular coloring of this block and really was looking at sort of the shapes that are in here, it really reminded me of bacteria shapes, a couple of the different bacteria shapes, round being cocci and our oblong being bacillus. And so that kind of inspired me as well, which I know is kind of kind of silly, and most of you be like, what? But that was just, it reminded me of having these stained bacteria, and so that kind of inspired that for me. So that's just some examples of the different pebbles we're going to look at in today's episode, and we're going to start by practicing drawing. So like any new pattern, I really recommend that you draw it out to get comfortable with that movement before you go to your machine, start building that muscle memory. And to help you with that, we are providing you with this Free Motion Basics Pebbles downloadable. You'll be able to download that right below this video in the comments section, and we're also going to have it on our events platform. With our events platform, we're going to provide a separate video that shows you how to do every one of these practice sections so that you can really get a feel for all of the different variations. So you're going to see that there is a little open circle. This is your start point, and we just want to follow it around, and then we're going to come into the next one. And so we've put these in boxes so you can practice kind of maintaining that shape. With pebbles, there's often an overlap that's going to happen, and as you move into the next pebble, you're circling in the opposite direction. So that just helps you maintain a good flow for creating those pebbles by alternating back and forth. But there's always going to be a little bit of overlap, and that really helps to solidify that circle shape opposed to when you're making a loop, because sometimes when you're making a loop it's kind of circular, but as you kind of come around the bottom like I kind of demonstrated there, you tend to get more of a point. So when you're doing this by kind of completing around, you can see how it maintains more of that circular shape. So that's how those two things differ. Right, so now that we have done the pebbles, the basic pebbles, we're ready to go practice those on the machine. I'm going to start in this corner here, and I'm just going to make my basic pebble. So we're just going to go around, and I'm just going to change directions whenever I want. Notice that when I change a direction, I have a little bit more overlap. If I'm going from right to left and I suddenly go left to right. And I want to keep them in this block is the way I've decided to do it. And we're just going to keep moving them. All right, so I'm going to back myself into a corner for a second. Okay, I still have all this to fill in because I want to fill this whole block in with my basic pebbles, but I left myself up here. So if you do that, don't panic. Just trace back over a previous pebble to get to an opening to start that next circle. I did it again. I'm just kind of follow along. All right, so that's just basic pebbles. Keeping in the same size, moving along however you want to fill them. I decided to fill that block. You can kind of notice how that block tends to pack down now compared to some of the other ones. So if I decided to maybe do some ruler work on this one, then this block is going to pop up more, right? So that gives you an idea there. Bubbles are basically like your basic pebbles, but instead of keeping them all the same size, you're going to alternate the sizes. So we started you with just getting some different sizes and getting comfortable with that. And in this one you can see that we do have some color variation, so you can see as we're switching which directions that you need to go as you are creating your bubbles. So again, starting at the open circle, we're going to follow it around, and you can see we have some arrows to start you off. And then once you get kind of the feel of that alternation, and we're going to make a bigger one, and we can make a little bit bigger one. We're going to make this next one smaller. We're going to make this next one bigger, and you can fill in all of these spaces that you see with even smaller ones if you'd like. But this first part is just to get you comfortable with changing the shape and the size of your bubbles. All right, so I'm going to start with some sizes, and I'm going to make them a little smaller as I get into the thing. And then as I get into the yellow, I think I want to make bigger bubbles and kind of fill in with some small ones as I get around. Close to those edges, I want to keep the bubbles on the inside of the yellow circle. That's just a choice I'm making, just to kind of give you an idea of why I might change some variability. And then as I continue on over here, and just like for the sake of you being able to see, I'll do some over here as well. So just going to create bigger and smaller. Again, you can see I'm going to back myself into a corner so I can move along the previous pebble to get there. Do a few around. Maybe I want a bigger one there, a little bit smaller. So much fun. So that gives you a couple different examples of making bubbles. The next one is the overlapping pebbles. So this is where you're intentionally trying to almost create more of a 3D effect, like you have a circle or a ball, and then there's like another one that's kind of layered over the top of it, right? So that's what you're gonna get with the overlapping pebbles. It's just gonna change that dimensionality a little bit for you. With overlapping pebbles, you can do them all the same size, or you can do them various sizes like we have on the example here. So sometimes you'll just kind of find naturally, even when you're doing your basic pebbles, that you tend to overlap. And that's okay, it's gonna look good regardless. So I am going to work in this square here. So I'm gonna bring my bobbin up again. Anytime you break your thread off, be sure to bring up your bobbin so that you don't end up with a knot in the back, especially with a design like this where you're going over several times. If you have that thread sticking underneath, you're going to have a more difficult time fishing it out to cut it off. So definitely pull those threads, those bobbin threads up. All right, so we're going to do the overlap. I'm going to do that here. Again, we're going to start with our basic pebble movement. Add a couple of those. And then I think I want to overlap there. Overlaps really look best when you have them mixed with some regular pebbles so that they stand out and bring a little more oomph to your design. So we'll do an overlap there. We'll overlap that pebble. So I want to kind of show you, do you see how like I had this pebble here, right? And then I did this overlap. It kind of creates this optical illusion that you now have something more in front than you had in the back. That dimensionality. You can do a couple like we did there. And I think I'll continue that over into this one here. Notice that you can do it with larger ones too, so almost like you're overlapping bubbles as you make them larger. The next one is ovals, and so this oval shape is going to be very, very similar to the basic pebbles, only now you're elongating them. We have them all the same size here, but you can alternate their sizes. You do tend to get a longer overlap, so you can see right here, I go over that line almost 3 times, right? Because I go around it this time, and then I come down again, and then I go over it again. So 3 times before I finish that, and then I'm going to kind of overlap to come up to this one. So you do get a little bit more overlap with these. So I'm just going to kind of move over to where I want to start. And then maybe I want to move an oval up this way. And then now I kind of, like I told you, you can overlap, which I did end up doing there. Continue another one. Here's another oval. Maybe I do a really long oval here to fill in this space. And I'm just using kind of the shape of the bottom of the spool here to help me determine the size of the ovals I want to pull in here. All right. And so now I'm ready to kind of change directions, and we'll do some vertical ovals going in the thread area of the spool. And we'll change some directions going maybe this way. Change our sizes up. Oops. See how I kind of hesitated and I was like, oh no, I started kind of changing something. I went with it, kept the circle, so now I just have a little circle that's in there, and then I'll just continue with the oval. Said you can't go wrong. They're going to look good no matter what. So don't panic. I think this is a great beginner pattern as you want to expand on some of your basic skills that you've learned so far. And then kind of like notice over here, I didn't fill in, so I can just either follow along the tops of those, or I could have stitched in the ditch, and I can create my last oval right here. Right. Now I'm going to switch directions again, and I'll do the horizontal ovals in this part. You can see that overlap that happens. And then maybe I just have a small little one there because of the shape and where I was in the corner. So that just gives you some ideas on how to practice and use these longer oval shapes in your pebble designs. Now we have echoed pebbles. Now echoed pebbles are really fun. I really like doing them when I have water elements and I want to make it look like somebody threw a stone and it just kind of rippled out, right? So you kind of get that rippling. To be a true echo, you are echoing around another line, and you're going to do a smaller circle first, and then once I complete that first circle, I'm going to do the echo circle in the same direction. So if you're doing this, say, where your line ends up in a ditch, right? So that would be great. But if you want more movement, then you would do the next circle, right? And then you would do the echo around that. So that just kind of gives you an idea. This here is practicing just moving around and creating the echo. So we'll continue with the lines there. Move around, continue with the echo. So again, we're going to start with your basic one, and then we're going to echo around it. Maybe fill in a little ones in between. I'm going to get myself to the top here, and then maybe this is a good place for another echo. I'm going to take that down through here because I want to show that you can do as many echoes as you like. So since this is going to be a little bit more circular, I can do an echo. Notice how what makes it a true echo is I'm not just doing a circle and doing another circle perfectly around it. I'm doing the first circle and then I'm making it bigger until I get to where the beginning of the original circle was, or that original pebble was, to create the echo just on the front part here, right? So I've come around. If I want to do another one, I can do that. If I want to do another one, I can do that. And then maybe now I fill in with some basic pebbles going around that. Maybe I want to kind of have another one coming out here. And I'll do like a twofer. And maybe I want to do a bigger one here where I have a 3. Again, movement is the same. One direction, then the other, except for when I'm actually doing the echo, then it's the same direction. But everything else is going to feel the same when you're making those pebbles. All right, so I'm going to work in this butterfly here, and I'm going to start with some long ovals to kind of fill in this space, to emphasize the fact that the shape of this is going to be the center part of the body of our butterfly. So I did a couple there. And then, if you ever look at butterflies, they're very, very complex in their decorations and stuff up here. And some of your moths will have really decorative parts here. But this part always tends to be a little bit bolder in the designs for butterflies than this part is here. So I'm going to continue with a little bit of this bubbling to kind of show an emphasis of like the sides coming out here, and then we're going to change it up. So I'm just going to start to open this up to doing some basic pebbles. I'm going to start filling some of this in. And then I think I'm going to start making them a little bit bigger and smaller, so adding some bubbles. So I did a couple, finishing this up, and then that's going to take me to this. So I definitely created a change in design a little bit here. Like I said, your basic bubbles are great for kind of starting to fill some things in when you have some of the alternate shapes and you're trying to stay within a confined area. So we're going to stop there, and I'm going to start to work on our first, let me just trim this off here. Going to start to work on our first main wing here, okay? So I know that the lines that you'll find in wings tend to come from the center part. So I'm just going to sew in the ditch coming up this way because I want to kind of keep that movement. And I want to maybe create some echo lines coming out of this. So I'll start with a pebble, and I'm going to do an echo. And I'm going to do another echo. And now I'm just going to do some basic pebbles here coming around. Find area. So we're going to stop there, and I'm going to start to, so I think I want to kind of keep this for the bottom part of the wing, or the bottom part of this front wing. All right, and so I've kind of created some kind of fun things that are happening here. And so now I want to kind of show this elongation. So I'm going to do some of our vertical ovals coming out of this. So I'll start with a, and then I'm going to do a big bubble here, because a lot of times butterflies have spots, right? So I want to kind of emphasize this one particular marking. And then I can fill back in with my traditional or basic pebbles. All right, so that kind of gives you some ideas there. You can see a little bit of natural overlap that happens. Like I said, it always looks good. And so just to kind of show adding some overlap in here, because I really kind of want to pack this down a little bit differently. I'll start up here, and I'm going to do a lot of overlap. Particular marking. So I overlapped and overlap. Overlap this one with my tradition, alternating my sizes of my pebbles as I'm doing the overlap. I just think it makes them fun. And you can kind of tighten them up by doing even more overlaps. All right, so that kind of gives you some ideas there. Okay, so that gives you some examples there of mixing some of those designs. And so I'm going to show you how to use pebbles with some other designs that we're going to be showing you in future episodes. So I am going to start with swirls. Then I'll add another swirl design. And now I can start to add some of my pebbles as filler around that design. So in this case, I'm just using some basic pebbles, back myself into a corner so I can follow my previous stitch lines. All right, so you can see we had those little bit of swirls with this, and then we did some filler. So it changes the dimensionality of your fabric, and just, you know, you still have a filler, but you have that fun swirl breaking that up a little bit. You can do it with flowers and with feathers. And then I'm gonna do some filler with some pebbles around it, because the pebbles will also help you move to another section if you are doing a really dense design. And then I want to show you pea pods and how you can add some pebbles to that. And I'm going to create my first pea pod shape. And so I could just end my pea pod here, but I want to put some peas in my pea pod. So this is where I'm going to be using my pebbles. Feathers. All right, so that just gives you some ideas of other ways that you can use pebbles in other designs to make things really pop. I like to use pebbles if I have like a big sunflower. I'll put the pebbles in the center, and then I'll move on to other designs like swirly designs and so on to kind of really help build that. All right, so I hope you are excited to go and try some different pebbles that we showed you today and add that element to your quilts. Remember, we do have that downloadable practice sheets for you to practice all the different ones that I showed you today in terms of the pebbles alone and the bubbles and the ovals and all of that. And remember, they look good even when you think you've made a mistake. It just adds to the design, very forgiving. So please check that out. If you like this video, we would love it if you liked and subscribed to this channel. Next video that you're going to see that has to do with free motion quilting is going to be our additional series on intermediate free motion quilting. And we're going to be starting that with doing some micro stippling. So you're going to be using some of the skills that you've learned already in our free motion basics, but on a smaller scale. And that's what makes it a little bit tougher, because you're working in that tiny little bit of muscle movement. If you have any questions about free motion quilting, pebbles, or any of the things that we talked about today, please feel free to write them in the comments below. Thank you for joining me. Again, I'm Angelique, and until next time, please sew with love and grace.